Hello world, welcome back to Razor RC. It's time to do the review of the Schumacher Cat L1 Evo. So I've had this buggy for about 3 or 4 weeks, about a month I guess, and I've been running a lot of packs through it, doing a lot of testing, tuning, and just want to share my thoughts on this. So this is the full review of the Schumacher Cat L1 Evo. So this is a brand new 4-wheel drive buggy from Schumacher, a company based out in the UK. They've had a long history of making RC cars all the way back to, I think, the early mid 80s, something like that. I think they invented the ball differential as well. So a storied brand within the RC community. Mainly known for higher traction surface type vehicles. So we're talking AstroTurf, carpet. They do make stuff that you can run under, but I think their specialty really is in that high traction surface, which is commonly found in the UK. So this has been out for about a month, I think the end of December 2019. So here we are in February of 2020, and it's been out for a couple months. So yeah, I just want to talk through this vehicle and give it a rating in a bunch of different categories. As usual, I want to give it a rating from 1 to 5 stars. 5 stars would be basically best in class, 1 star would be quite poor, and 3 stars would be average. Not a bad score, but pretty much just kind of up to par with other 4-wheel drive vehicles in this class. So competitors to this vehicle are obviously things like the Team Associated B74, the X-Ray XB4, the Yokomo YZ2, the Kyosho ZX7, and then TLR is coming out with a brand new buggy, the 22X4, here in a month or two. So that's pretty much what it's up against, and I have a lot of experience with most of those other brands, including things like the Techno, and so yeah, I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of 4-wheel drive buggies in general and how this compares and relates to those other guys. So this is really the last of the belt drive vehicles. Belt drive has pretty much petered out here. TLR is getting rid of their 22.4 2.0 and replacing it with a shaft drive vehicle. Yokomo switched over to the shaft drive a couple years ago. So really, this is the last man standing in the belt drive class. And me personally, I think there are some advantages to belt drives. I think there are also some disadvantages as well, and we'll go over those a little bit. But I just want to give you my thoughts. Okay, so first up is the build, and this build is a little more complicated, as you might expect from a belt drive vehicle. 2 belts, front and back, a lot of carbon fiber pieces, sort of this bottom aluminum 2mm chassis, of course, and then carbon fiber stiffeners up top. Comes with wing, body, and wheels, which is kind of nice. So this will use TLR 22.4 wheels up front, and then actually associated wheels in the back. So overall, the build was okay. The instruction manual is fine. I wouldn't say it's particularly good. I wouldn't say it's particularly bad. Some spots are a little ambiguous, and I have a full build video on things to look for in the manual and sort of things to watch out for when you put this together. There's a lot of aluminum carbon fiber parts, so all the aluminum pieces, you definitely want to make sure you clean off those screws with some motor spray and use Loctite liberally on every metal to metal connection. A lot of carbon fiber as well, a lot of what they call the S3 material, which is sort of this black material used for the side rails, used for the shock towers. I'm not really sure what S3 is. I'm guessing it's some kind of like fiberglass or carbon Kevlar type composite, but it's very stiff. You know, sort of performs like carbon fiber in my opinion. So yeah, a lot of that sprinkled throughout. Shocks are not particularly easy to build in my opinion. They got sort of this two-piece cap with the plastic top part and then a little sort of aluminum ring to hold it down. The shocks also have sort of this ball cup style snap-on onto the ball studs on the shock towers themselves, especially here in the back. So that's a little annoying. They also do, so there's a lot of sort of weird quirks with this vehicle. Like the hinge pins are not really captured by anything. They actually just have a little set screw up here up top that sort of presses down against them, a little flat spot on that hinge pin. I guess it holds in place. They haven't fallen out or anything, but kind of a unique design. They have little O-rings on the aluminum hexes to hold in the pin. So I guess if that O-ring ever broke, your pin would just fall out. But yeah, I'm sure it's okay. Just a little bit funky design. They also sort of have these quick clips, I guess they're called, these little plastic spacers. Instead of like aluminum spacers or plastic spacers, they just sort of have these clips that you can just pull them out move your hub around and then snap it in on the other side if you want. So kind of funky design. I mean, kind of cool stuff. Steel universals all the way around, front and rear, so that's kind of unusual. Captured ball studs all around, so that's kind of interesting. So yeah, pretty unique and interesting design. Some other nice cool things, carbon fiber pieces here on the chassis and stuff. So overall, the build, I'm going to give it a 3. I wish the instruction manual was a little more clear. The build is definitely more complicated, especially with all these belts. There's a lot of bearings, spacers, pins and stuff in the center transmission. It is easy sort of to miss little things here and there. So overall, the build, not the easiest. I would not recommend this for a beginner. This is one of the more complicated vehicles, certainly in the 1-ton scale racing class. So not really the best for beginners. Things I like, does come with body, wing, and wheels. That's kind of cool. A lot of nice sprinkled parts of carbon fiber, aluminum, S3 material, all that kind of stuff. The drive shafts. So all the materials and pieces actually seem to be very high quality, especially aluminum carbon fiber pieces. Super, super high quality, really nice pieces overall. So overall, I'm going to give the build a 3. Okay, moving on to the design of the Schumacher Cat L1 Evo. Definitely a very unique design, as you might expect from a belt drive. It's completely different from something like a TLR 22 Ford 2.0, which I also owned. A totally separate design, a lot more modern, a lot more adjustments. So kind of cover the vehicle front to back a little bit. Of course, shock mounting positions up top, up bottom, universals, as I mentioned, in the actual axles, sway bars front and rear. They're kind of nice because they're sort of just captured there when you pop off the top of the diff halves. You don't really have to remove that. You can just kind of leave that in place. You have little inserts for diff height adjustments. So if you're running really higher traction surfaces with lower ride heights, you want to raise those diffs. And then when you're running lower traction surfaces with higher ride heights, you want to lower that diff. A little bit of adjustment here in the camber block up here. You can sort of raise and lower the axles a little bit. You got a little spacer there you can pop out. As I mentioned, sort of lightweight drilled aluminum hexes with an O-ring capturing that drive pin. Kind of unusual. Captured ball cups here on the steering links, and then traditional ball cups here on the camber links. Aluminum, steering plate with Ackerman adjustment, of course, forward and backer. Floating servo saver or servo mount right there. Then you have this fairly complex center differential and center transmission case. You have a slipper, 2-pad slipper set up, 2 pulleys, aluminum, and then they sort of send power front and rear. And then of course you have belt tensioners here, sort of adjustable things to raise or lower the tightness on that belt. The pinions on this thing are a little bit unusual. They call them the long boss pinions, but they're kind of like extended pinions, so you do have to buy specialized pinions. I believe these only come in steel today, so a little bit heavier on the drivetrain. In my opinion, this is not quite as good for 13.5 spec racing because I feel like there's a little more drag in this vehicle with all the bearings and stuff. So on the spec racing side, maybe not quite as good, but they did extend and expand the belts on this, so a little more durability. I think they're 5mm belts now, up from I think 3mm or 4mm from before. So a little more durability in the belts, but also a little more drag, of course. So you've got the center mounted motor, little ESC and electronics plates here, carbon fiber that you can sort of unscrew and remove those as needed. Fairly compact design here on the electronics. I've got the ESC, little capacitor and motor there. Not a lot of room, but it's not super bad. Just need a little bit of work with your wiring. And then here's a pretty unusual design element. It's got what's basically a one-way slipper, or what they call the front adjustable brake. And what that is basically kind of like a slipper that only works on the front end. So under power, it basically locks up, gives you full power front and rear wheels, but under braking, it can actually slip, and you can tune that with that little nut right there. Tighten it down if you want a little less slip. You can loosen it if you want a little more slip on the front. So really useful actually on high traction surfaces like carpet. I did find it very valuable. Kind of prevents the front end from locking as much. You know, when you're braking, the vehicle sort of transfers weight to the front. That allows it to slip a little. Allows the front and the rear to basically still be applying braking power and actually kind of smoothly come into the brakes rather than sort of like try to endo all the time. So I found that pretty cool and useful tuning adjustment. Definitely recommended, and something you'll want to play with. Battery tray here in the back. Of course, you run shorties lengthwise across in a couple different positions on where you can mount that. So rear end, pretty much the same, forward mounted shocks. You got the universal drive shafts, sort of captured ball cups here on the inside, and then regular ball cups on the outside. And again, they have those quick clips where you can move the hub forward and back as usual. Nice little aluminum diff halves on the bottom, and then composite pieces up top, and then aluminum C and D blocks here in the back. Of course, you can adjust toe, anti-squat, all that good stuff as per usual. So yeah, that's pretty much the design of the vehicle. A little more complicated, but I like all the tuning adjustments you get, especially something like the front adjustable brake. That's not something you can get on basically any other vehicle. So a little bit better design overall. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. Things I don't like, not particularly a fan of these shocks. I don't really like these ball cup styles because it's kind of painful or hard to get these on and off. You basically have to snap these on or off, or you could remove this nut, but you kind of wear out these little shock tower pieces because there's not a whole lot of material holding those inside. Also not a fan of the springs. They're sort of like this tapered spring style. These little spring cups on the bottom also are sort of cut out, but in my opinion don't really hold the spring on all that well. I do find the springs pop off on this a little more commonly than other vehicles. And I don't like the two-piece shock caps. I did actually get aluminums. I'll probably put those on, but you know, they have these little holes you got to drill out to put the set screw in. I don't really like the seals. I don't feel like they seal quite as well. I mean, even the designer of this mentioned that under hard landings, you know, these shocks can kind of like compress a little bit. A little oil can leak out. And it's like, I mean, come on. Why would we do that? Anyways, the design pretty good overall, but just some little things not a big fan of. 4 stars, definitely above average with all the adjustments, but not perfect. Okay, so the big question is, how does this vehicle perform? I've been running a lot of packs through this, doing some testing, tuning, driving this back to back with another favorite four-wheel drive buggy of mine, the Team Associated B74. And overall, I think the performance is on par. There are some things I think it does better. So let's kind of talk about acceleration and braking. That's kind of where this thing shines a little bit. I am a fan of belt drives because I feel like the steering precision is a little more direct. There's less slop in the drivetrain overall. You know, you sort of feel like your finger is more directly connected to the wheels, and what you're doing with the trigger is translating directly and exactly to the vehicle. I also feel like there's slightly more traction with the belt drive vehicle because it's applying the power a little more precisely. Maybe a hair of give in the belts as they stretch just a tiny bit, but it kind of gives you that nice little power delivery and not so abrupt. So I think the acceleration is really good. The brake on this is also really good because you have that front adjustable brake. You can get this to, you know, basically brake exactly as you want between belt tensions, slipper tensions, and that FAB or front adjustable brake. You can get this thing to brake exactly how you want. Very, very stable, and yeah, just one of the highlights of this vehicle. Now, in terms of handling, in my opinion, this is kind of average. I wouldn't say it's particularly more nimble or less nimble or anything like that. I do think the belts kind of, I mean, as they're rotating forward, I do feel like maybe direction changes are slightly worse than this as compared to other vehicles, but it is quite stable, easy to drive. I'm running the Jorn Neumann setup for carpet, which I think is pretty good. Making some minor changes here and there, but overall a pretty good starting setup for the vehicle. Jumping and landing, it's interesting because the shocks I think on this vehicle are really, really good. Whatever they're doing with these shock shafts or aluminum pieces or whatever, they seem pretty high quality. I'm not a fan of the shocks in general, but I have to agree they actually perform pretty well. So jumping and landing is actually pretty smooth. It does tend to kind of nosedive a little more. I experienced that with other belt drive vehicles like my TLR. But yeah, so maybe jumping and landing not quite as good, but the plushness of the shocks are really, really good. So overall, I'm going to give the performance sort of an average rating. I'm going to give it 3 stars. The other downside is that with these belt drives, there is a little more drag on the drivetrain. I mean, some people say there's less with a belt drive as opposed to shaft drive. But in my opinion, there's a lot of bearings, The belts themselves have friction, of course. And then the sort of the empirical evidence I have is, every motor I've ever run on a belt drive vehicle always ran a little bit hotter and seemed a little bit slower than a shaft drive equivalent. So that might be another downside. For spec racing, I don't think this really is the best choice in something like a 13.5 class. So overall performance, I'm gonna give it an average rating, 3 stars. I've beat on this buggy really hard. Carpet is probably the most unforgiving environment that you could drive a vehicle, an RC car, because all the jumps, all the ramps are made out of basically plywood. They're made out of wood. When you smash into one of those, you feel it. I mean, there is no give, no softness whatsoever in those jumps. When you lawn dart this, I mean, the full impact gets applied to the vehicle. It really is the worst condition in terms of trying to test durability. So overall, actually, the buggy has performed really well. I mean, if you look at the battle scars on the body, if you look at the battle scars on the wing, you can tell I've crashed this thing a lot, and maybe that's a testament to my poor driving. But overall, actually, nothing has broken on this buggy. I'm completely shocked at how durable it is, because I've definitely probably tried to do more damage to this buggy than any other vehicle. And I was a little concerned because the chassis is 2 millimeters. Did not look particularly durable, but everything is held up. The body, the chassis, no tacoing, nothing. Even the wing has held up, no cracks or anything. So quite impressed overall. Actually, a little crack right there. But yeah, very durable vehicle. Super impressed. I think if you could break this thing, I'd be impressed. I'm going to give it 5 stars. I've nosedived this thing straight into jumps, probably 10 times, and nothing has broken. Normally, with 4-wheel drive buggies, because they're a little bit quicker, because they have a little less kick up front, the arms tend to take a lot more abuse. The hubs, everything tend to take a lot more abuse. So this thing has held up through all of my crashes, and I'm going to give it full marks, 5 stars. Parts for the Schumacher Cat L1 Evo can be a little more difficult to get here in the United States. If you're in the UK, it may be a little bit of a different story, but certainly in the United States, it is not a popular brand, not a popular vehicle. There are places online that you can get stuff from A-Main, Discount RC. There's a few other stores. So you can get parts. I even ordered parts directly from England, and they shipped it to me in about a week. Not the easiest vehicle to own, but not the worst either. I'm going to give it a below average score, 2 stars. The other thing you kind of want from support and maintenance is aftermarket support, sort of third-party stuff, online setup sheets, that kind of thing. That, again, is not as much stuff for the Schumacher. I think Clinic RC makes some aftermarket parts. Setup sheets-wise, you pretty much just have to go to the Schumacher website or hang out in the Facebook news group, Facebook groups or whatever, and try to get information. So support and maintenance definitely is an area, it's a little more complicated. On the maintenance side, belt drive obviously is, again, more complicated than shaft drive. It's going to be a little bit harder to work on, but this is actually fairly easy to work on. I mean, you sort of have these diff halves, you can pop things on and off. I think it's just sort of like 4 screws holding those on, you can get to the diff. So overall, pretty good. The center transmission, I think, is fairly complicated. I'm a little concerned if I ever have to take that thing apart, because there are a lot of just little spacers, washers, pins, bearings. You kind of have to line everything all up, and it is a bit difficult. But yeah, overall, not a terrible vehicle to work on, but a little bit on the more difficult side. So I'm going to give the support and maintenance category 2 stars. Schumacher Cat L1 Evo sells for $550 here in the United States, a little bit above average in the price range. I think what you get is really high quality, though. Overall, the carbon fiber pieces are super nice. Even these aluminum pieces are super nice. I mean, you can tell they're machine billet, aluminum anodized, and then remachined and chamfered. These like thumb screws I got on here are super trick. So yeah, the materials and everything are really high quality on this vehicle. The S3 pieces, every carbon fiber, everything is just super nice quality. A little bit more expensive, but I think you get what you pay for. $550 and probably one of the top quality kits out there. The shocks are really nice. So I feel like it's fair. It's not a smoking good deal. but it's not, I wouldn't consider it actually expensive for what you get. So I did notice the pricing can kind of change. Like other sites might be selling this for more like $600 or something. I tend to use Aiming as my go-to pricing standard, and so it's $5.50 there. I think that's a fair price. I want to give the value category 3 stars. Not great, not poor, but actually you know, sort of average overall, and I think you get what you pay for. All right, so my final thoughts on the Schumacher Cat L1 Evo is that it's pretty cool little RC car. Now, it's really going to come down to whether you want a belt drive vehicle or not, right? If you do want a belt drive vehicle, this is the one to get. I mean, nobody else makes one anymore, but I do feel like it is a competitive and modern and, you know, pretty much up-to-date vehicle that can compete. I don't think it's the best performing vehicle, especially on something like spec racing where it's going to be a little bit slower power-wise than other shaft drive vehicles, but it is a cool RC car overall. I also think it's geared more towards sort of expert level drivers or builders. This is not something I would recommend for a newbie, somebody even that's, you know, building their second kit, maybe even. I mean, there's a lot of adjustments you have to make and you have to get right. Belt drive vehicles obviously are a little more complicated to get set up correctly because you got a lot of adjusters. I mean, belt tension, of course, you have to get right. There's a little adjuster for the front and back. That's difficult to get right. The slipper, of course, is going to impact that and sort of make you think you've got belt slipping or something is slipping when it's actually just your slipper clutch. And then the other adjustment is that FAB. So you sort of have these 4 different adjustments where things are slipping, things have to be tensioned just right to get the car to perform exactly how you want. But if you can get that set up perfectly correctly, it's amazing how this thing drives, because it drives differently than any other vehicle out there, especially under braking with that adjustments. I mean, you can get this dialed exactly how you want. Some other interesting things I found with the belts are like things like the rear belt. You generally want to run a little bit softer. Have that adjuster set to about the 3rd way position, but you know, you might think, okay, belt tension will affect, you know, any slipping or whatever in the back, maybe a little more throttle response, because if you run a little looser, your motor's a little freer. But the other interesting thing that, you know, you may not realize is that belt tension also affects rear flex, because I noticed when I tightened that down a little bit too much, the whole car kind of felt locked up, including just the chassis. The chassis was not able to flex quite as much as you wanted under loads, under landing, under cornering, etc. So all these things are sort of working together symbiotically, if you want to say, sort of in concert. You have to get it all right, but when you do, it is pretty amazing stuff. So yeah, overall, pretty cool buggy. I don't think it's best in class performance wise. It's not best in class, you know, price wise or anything like that, but it's really more a kit, I think, specialized more towards higher traction surfaces. People that want a different experience, people that want a ton of tunability. Probably there's more tunability in this vehicle than any other vehicle out there on the market. If you like to play with different settings and try different things and get the vehicle running exactly how you want, this is definitely a good choice. And it's got all the modern stuff like adjustable diff heights, adjustable axle heights, that kind of thing. It's got as much carbon fiber and aluminum as you can throw at an RC car. So overall, cool kit. I'm glad I bought it. I am definitely going to keep this. I think it's one of my favorite vehicles to drive, even though I don't think it drives quite as fast as some of the other stuff out there. And a lot of that is going to come down to tuning and setup, but that's something you'll have to also work out on your own when you're driving a smaller brand like a Schumacher Cat L1 Evo. So anyways, that's my thoughts on this vehicle, Schumacher Cat L1 Evo. I hope you enjoyed this video. Of course, hit that like, share, subscribe button. Look for more videos soon, and thanks for watching.